Shri Advaita Gadadhara Srivasari Gaur Bhakta Vrinda Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Srivasari Gaur Bhakta Vrinda. Okay, back by popular demand is this microphone. So I just, I haven't used it, and there's always some little bugs in the mix somewhere. So just let me know. We are okay. You can hear me well. But I want to make sure before I begin chanting that you can hear me well, because I don't want to chant a kirtan and find out nobody heard it. And it looks like we're having this problem again with video freezing, which it's either an internet problem or a Facebook problem. I think it's an internet problem. Tanya will post the quotes. Okay, let me open up the database where I'm reading from. And Tanya, if you can post the first quote, that way I'll be able to find it. Although my database is not happy. It's not bringing up my bookmarks. We have trouble in paradise. So maybe we'll do something unique. I'll actually read it from your posting here. I wonder if I can make it bigger. Yeah, because my database is not accessing bookmarks anymore. Okay, you explain that one to me. I just love software. It's so interesting. I will try to reload it. You know, it works one way, and then the next day it decides we're not going to work that way anymore. And then I find 7 years later, well, that's because you hit this when you exited, and now you have no access to bookmarks. Or the bookmark turned into an icon. And people my age, you know, there's no way to search bookmarks. Anyway, I need someone's help. If you know database, under tools, it always came up bookmark and a whole menu, and now under tools, the menu's gone. So, anyway. We'll do kirtan, and I'm just going to read. I'll read right from what Tanya posts. Let's see how that works, if that works at all. You know, all of you who are younger, you don't have as much frustration with technology as those of us who are older do. Because we grew up with real things, you know, like you touch them. You touch a button, it does one thing. There are no menus on the button, and you actually touch it. And if something goes wrong with it, you just probably blow some air into it or knock it around, and it works again. Or you get it repaired. Of course, when I was young, things were made better. They didn't break down so much. I remember the first time I went to England in 1980. I noticed how everything was built so well, very strong. That was England. But I think now, no, not so much is made locally. I should do all this preparation before, right? You ever think like that when I'm setting up? I think of it every day. Why didn't I do this before? Maybe one day we'll actually do it before. Radha Madhava Kunjabi Hari Radha Madhava Kunjabi Hari Gopijanabha Girivaradhari Gopijanabha Girivaradhari Yashodhanandana Rajajanaranjana Yashodhanandana Rajajanaranjana Yamunatiravanachari Yamunatiravanachari Radhama Nava Kunjabi Hari Radhama Dhama Kunjabi Hari Gopi Janavama Girivardhari Gopi Janavama Girivardhari Soranandana Jajanaran Soranandana Brajajanaranjana Jamanatira Vanachari Jamanatira Vanachari Radham Madhava Punjabi Hari Radha Madhava Punjabi Hari Radha Madhava Punjabi Hari Radha Madhava Punjabi Jai Go Paramanandi Hari Hari Bol Si Radha Madhava Namo Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prashtaya Bhutale Srimate Bhakti Vedanta Shamaniti Namane Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pacharine Nirvisesa Sunyavadi Paschatya Satarine. I'm going to pray for the Veda base one more time. See if it changes his mind and gives me the proper menu, because it would be easier. Okay. It looks like it has changed. Looks like there's not as many items on the menu. Yeah. We're in trouble, everyone. Customize. I'm not going to try to fix it while you're all watching me. Okay. So, in the interest of time and simplicity, and I don't know if this is simple or not, but we will find out, I'm going to read what Tanya posts. When he met Sri Ramananda Roy on the bank of the Godavari, the Varnasrama Dharma followed by the Hindus was mentioned by the Lord. Srila Ramananda Roy said that by following the principles of Varnasrama Dharma, the system of four castes and four orders, see more, and my computer is taking time. Dangerous word here, caste. Prabhupada used the word castes. It's four divisions and four orders. It's four divisions. It has come to be called caste, so Prabhupada used that word. But it's not actually caste. That's actually a Portuguese word, caste, casta, as far as I understood. They called it caste. Anyway, four orders of human life, we understand what Prabhupada's saying. Others may misunderstand. system of four castes and four orders of human life, everyone could realize transcendence. In the opinion of the Lord, the system of Varnashram Dharma is superficial only, and it has very little to do with the highest realization of spiritual values. The highest perfection of life is to get detached from the material attachment and proportionately realize the transcendental loving service of the Lord. Lord Caitanya was coming to teach prema. So he felt, well, Varnashram is not really, it's not really related to prema. It's too distant or gradual. It's not what he came to give. But Prabhupada later said that, well, our position is different because we want to contribute to organizing society in a way that people can gradually become Krishna conscious. And Lord Chaitanya's mission was to deliver the highest thing. And he wanted Ramananda Roy to speak about the highest thing. So when he spoke about Varnashram, in the sense of discussion, philosophical discussion, it was kind of a starting point. So if we're talking about social organization spreading Krishna consciousness around the world, then Varnashram is an important discussion. If you're talking about Prema Pumarto Mahan, the ultimate goal of prema, if you're talking strictly Siddhanta, then the conversation graduated into talking about the love of the gopis and the love of Radha. And that's where Mahaprabhu wanted that conversation to go because that's what he came to give. So when Prabhupada was asked why Mahaprabhu rejected Varnashram, if you're asking us to establish it, he said, our position is different. We're not Lord Chaitanya. Our mission is it's the same mission, of course, but the people we're preaching to need to come gradually. And society needs to be organized in a way that people can become God conscious. So you see that a lot of times atheism, agnosticism, or theism is a cultural phenomenon. You'll find more atheists in certain parts of the world than in others. So the idea of Varnashram is it's a cultural, social organization that would gradually elevate people in God consciousness. So you can't see me, bad internet. I'm going to have to call the company. Or I can try again, and then we'll see what happens. If at first you don't succeed, try again. And if I disappear again and freeze like I'm doing now, what can be done? Separation, but hearing is most important, seeing. As sometimes Prabhupada would say, or Bhaktisiddhanta would say, if you're not pure, then what are you seeing? You're only seeing material. So better here. Okay, so now I have to find where I left off. In the opinion of the Lord, the system of Varnashram Dharma is superficial only, and it has very little to do with the highest realization of spiritual values. The highest perfection of life is to get detached from the material attachment and proportionately realize the transcendental loving service of the Lord. The personality of Godhead recognizes a living being who is progressing in that line. Devotional service, therefore, is the culmination of the culture of all knowledge. In other words, Varnashram is meant to bring you to knowledge and eventually devotional service. But when Prabhupada started the preaching mission, and when he wrote this, Varnashram was not really on his list. It wasn't, as far as I understand, it wasn't something that he had really thought much about establishing in the West. And until about 1974, 75, he said, we should establish it. Because after evaluating the situation within our movement, he saw that not everyone was doing well as a Brahmin. Not everyone was following their initiation vows. And so if you want to have if you want to engage people in spiritual life, like we often talk about how we would like to see the world Krishna conscious or God conscious. What would that look like? Well, certainly we wouldn't be lining people up and saying, you have to be initiated, otherwise your life is wasted, which is kind of the subtle implication often when we talk about devotional service. Well, you need to be initiated, because if you don't get initiated, it's like going to be difficult for you, and maybe you won't go back to Godhead. So it's kind of the way most devotees are meant to see, or often see. Maybe it's a little different now, but we want to get initiated because we feel it's kind of like a necessary rite of passage. And until we get initiated, we feel like we're maybe not complete. But obviously everyone in the world is not Brahminically inclined, and not everyone in the world would be able to chant 16 rounds and follow the 4 principles, and not everyone in the world would even want to get initiated, be that committed. So Varnashram it starts with engaging your occupation. Yat karoshi yat ashnasi, what you do, what you eat, what you offer, what you give away. You can do that for Krishna even without following strictly principles of bhakti, and then gradually you can be elevated. And someday you will have Brahminical qualifications. So Prabhupada saw that everyone in the movement was not Brahminically inclined. So he said, well, we need Varnashram. And the devotee said, well, you need it. We need it for the outside world, right? Not for ISKCON. He said, no. So many devotees are falling down. We need it in ISKCON also. But so ISKCON really hasn't adapted to that paradigm, because I think most of you who are not initiated are probably thinking, I need to get initiated sooner than later. And so if you look at it from the platform of making the world Krishna conscious, then it becomes common sense that we wouldn't say that to everyone in the world. You all need to get initiated sooner than later. We would say you should engage in devotional service. You should hear Bhagavad Gita. You should offer your food and so forth. And initiation should be something that comes from the heart of the individual, not from the pressure of being made to think, if I don't get initiated, then I don't have connection with Prabhupada, or connection with the disciplic succession, or connection with my guru, until I get initiated, and like that. Then that kind of pushes people to want to get initiated, in thinking that maybe initiation is going to be a life-changing event, and it's going to secure them a place on the Vaikuntha airship back to Godhead, and it's not exactly like that. And obviously, you couldn't engage the whole world that way, because everyone's not on that platform. So it's a very interesting discussion. If you are, we talk about instituting Varnashram, and that discussion is often based on discussions of self-sufficiency, living off the land, simplicity, which is not always an essential. It's one aspect of Varnashram, but if we're looking at it on a very practical level, if we say, well, how do we establish Varnashram if we're all in the city, which we all are right now? And I think step one would be to stop telling people you have to get initiated if you want to go back to Godhead and you want to be connected to Prabhupada. Now you might say, well, we don't exactly tell people that. Well, we don't exactly not tell them that. Or we don't exactly explain our philosophy in a way that when they read those things in the books, which are true, you should be initiated. That is part of the process. But it makes it sound like if you don't get initiated, then you're a failure. And so if that were true, how could we do Varnashram? Because Varnashram is not going to push people to be Brahmins who are not. So that was it's just an observation on my part, that I think a lot of the preachers today, the devotees who are helping people come to Krishna consciousness, are very much attuned to this reality that we can't push people. We can only offer appetizer of the taste of Krishna consciousness. We can't force people to do anything. And that we encourage people that whatever you're doing, as Lord Caitanya said, stita, wherever you're situated, stane, stita, stay where you're situated, but shruti katan, listen, hear. You don't have to change your life drastically, but you should listen. And so the idea is hear from Shastra, chant as much as you can, and engage your time, your money, your intelligence, your action according to your nature in Krishna service. So it's interesting because a lot of the devotees who are on the front lines today, they naturally say these things to people. They realize that everybody's not ready, and we can't push people into a temple. Not everyone. Sometimes people move into a temple and they have a really difficult time. So temple life's not meant for everyone. But Krishna consciousness is meant for everyone, so they'll naturally preach to people. Well, what do you like to do? Can you do this for Krishna? So in a sense, a lot of the preachers who are very liberal are actually preaching Varnashram, maybe even unknown to them. It's interesting, isn't it? So by telling people, stay in your position and here, engage your nature in Krishna's service, and determine what ashram will be best for you at this particular point in your life, you are establishing Varnashram. And if you force somebody to engage, particularly in a Brahminical way, and they're not inclined, that's not Varnashram. Or you push people to do something that really they're not by nature able to do or inclined to do. That's not Varnashram. Of course, that may be surrender in our temples, just do what you're told, surrender. Then we're talking about bhakti beyond Varnashram. But if we're talking about people in general, then we find what inspires them and engage them. So that's a different kind of Varnashram where you're not living off the land and establishing a lot of traditional principles and values, which is usually what's spoken about when you talk about Varnashram. But also in our work in the city, that we can't talk about Varnashram if we keep forcing people who are not Brahmins to live like Brahmins. Or, on your way to being a Brahmin, that's fine. And when you're ready, then you're ready. And you're not ready before you're ready. And a lot of people are not ready, and they're kind of forced to think, well, I should do this. Then they realize they can't do it later on, so that's not good. Devotional service, therefore, is the culmination of the culture of all knowledge. When Sri Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, appeared for the deliverance of all fallen souls, he advised the deliverance of all living entities as follows. The Supreme Absolute Personality of Godhead, from whom all living entities have emanated, must be worshipped by all their respective engagements, because everything that we see is also the expansion of his energy. That is the way of perfection. So Prabhupada's describing Varnashram as how, just the general philosophy of Varnashram. That is the way of real perfection, and it is approved by all bona fide acharyas, past and present. So the first step of Varnashram is that we teach people that everything belongs to Krishna, so you use everything in his service as best you can. That's the principle. So now what can you do and how can you use it? The system of Varnashram is more or less based on moral and ethical principles. There is very little realization of the transcendence as such. And Lord Sri Caitanya Mahaprabhu rejected it as superficial and asked Ramananda Roy to go further into the matter. Yeah, Nadia, I deleted that document because I was just using I figured out how to bookmark. So can you send me that document again? I'll just use that. That's better. Okay. So, Tanya, where's the next thing to read? You want to post the next thing? Mhm. So I don't know if we've talked about this, but here Prabhupada's talking about Varnasrama, and then the last thing he said, well, it's basically ethical or moral. It's helping people kind of get a foundation upon which they could build a spiritual life. Because if people are sinful, it's hard to be religious, obviously. So in a society, well, Prabhupada said the leaders of society should ensure that people are following their religion, whatever religion it is. That's the duty of the government. We want to make sure you're following religious principles. So, you want people to be able to follow religious principles. So Varnashram Dharma, it works within the government because the laws of the government become aligned with spiritual principles, religious principles. And so people tend to be more pious. Pious people then will have the easiest time going from piety to religiosity to spirituality and then to devotional service. And we see this practically in our work around the world, where people are more religious or more pious. They generally take to Krishna consciousness more easily. Although sometimes it's a problem because they already have their own religion they don't want to change, but they've been their religion is misguiding them in some ways or in many ways. So that's another problem. But Krishna says in the Gita that antakata papam, when you end your sin, then you're ready for bhakti. So just like we follow four principles. Why do we follow four principles? Because you can't do bhakti and be sinful. So to elevate society, obviously, you have to minimize sin. And we've seen in the world, the problem with trying to get people to give up sin is they don't want to. And you can't ask people to give up sin unless you give them a process with which they can give it up, and you can give them something of greater value. So I don't know if you all know this, but alcohol became illegal in the 1920s. I don't know the history of it and why the government did that. I mean, we could guess why they didn't, because it's degrading society. And people were making alcohol. And so and people were going crazy without their alcohol. So the government had to change the law back again. They couldn't prevent people from drinking alcohol, even though it was illegal. So you can't just prohibit people from doing something if you don't give them a process that would purify them of their desire to do it, right? So that now, today, you could imagine if I were running for president and they said, what's your platform? And I said, well, if you elect me as president, all the slaughterhouses will be closed. All production and sale of alcohol and cigarettes will be closed. All people engaged in the illegal drug trade will be locked up and or killed on the spot. All thieves will have their hands cut off, etc., etc. Probably, I'm not going to get voted for. But let's say I just said I would rectify a lot of problems, but I didn't say how I would do it. And then I was elected president, and I said, okay, this is how we're going to do it. And then I told them, we're going to close the slaughterhouses. Tobacco is now illegal. Alcohol is now illegal, etc. Probably within 24 hours, I would be shot, or at least within that week, or there would be riots on the street. So Prabhupada said that the way that the only way a Krishna consciousness government could ever happen is if the people were first Krishna conscious. So it's kind of like it's an interesting argument, because the duty of the leader is to make people Krishna conscious. But unless people are somewhat Krishna conscious, they wouldn't vote for anyone who was Krishna conscious. So Prabhupada said that's how you would do it. If you educated enough people, they would vote for a Krishna conscious leader. They would want these things. If we don't want meat, let's close it down. You get a majority of the population that doesn't want meat, then they would vote for a president or a prime minister who would be willing to make slaughter illegal, at least slaughter of cows illegal. But now even in India, some states have made slaughter of cows illegal, and people are complaining, the government's interfering with the livelihood of the farmers and this and that. That's India. So, what to speak of Western countries. So the people have to be ready for it. And if the people aren't ready for it, how could the government do anything? But still, you read in the Bhagavatam, where Prabhupada talks a lot about how we should organize society. And the connotation is, well, this would only be relevant if we were actually doing it. And the connotation is, well, I'm telling you how to do it, just in case. Or I'm telling you how to do it so any leader of the world who reads this book will know how to do it. So it shows at least one thing we can say for sure is that Prabhupada was definitely thinking about making the world Krishna conscious. That is for sure. Otherwise, why is he talking about these things? Of course, you could say, well, it's also applicable to us on a small scale within ISKCON. Yes and no, because we already have principles. Prabhupada already gave us so many principles. Then you say, well, as our society grows, there's more social issues and this and that. But most everything we follow anyway. But so Prabhupada's really directing the social organization topics and the political topics to the idea of world leaders, and or if any world leaders, including ourselves, if we ever become world leaders, if there are any Krishna conscious world leaders, you have some general idea. Now, if we talk about Varnashram, one of the problems we have in talking about Varnashram is, for us, it's a bit of a theoretical model. Maybe not so much for India, but even in modern day India, you don't see much Varnashram. You see more of Varnashram in villages, but it's also, laden with misunderstandings. So we'll understand more about Varnashram as more devotees try to engage in it. But I will say this, and I think this is obvious, and you've probably thought about this also, that the ideal position for a devotee in his life is to be living with other devotees. That would be ideal in a community. If in your city there was a beautiful community, there's a beautiful community just outside your city, in a beautiful forest, and all the devotees decided we'll all buy a little bit of land, or one wealthy devotee buys the land and builds enough housing for all of us, I think most devotees would want to live there, or many would want to live there, and those who were hesitant would later hear from the devotees how nice it is, how much more Krishna conscious they are living with the devotees. Now, if you added to that a situation in which that community had formed one or more businesses, so none of the community members had to leave to go into the city to work, and they didn't have to work with non-devotees, and they didn't have to interact with the world. All their work was done there, producing whatever it is we produce, education, producing products we grow, and so forth, whatever it is. The devotees, I think we could all agree, would be in an ideal environment for practicing their Krishna consciousness. Living together and not having to interact very much with the outside world would be ideal. So to me personally, when we talk about establishing Varnashram, I think of these two things. In our preaching, we just encourage everyone. And those who are Brahmins, they'll rise to that level on their own. We don't have to push them. And then we create communities where we can live together and work together. And if we do that, then The other things like self-sufficiency, they may or may not happen. If they happen, it's better, because then we're really independent of society. We don't depend on their food, their water, their electricity. The world can go blow up and we'd be fine. That's ideal. But until we get there, at least being able to live together and allowing other people to live in that community who are not initiate candidates at this point in time, but they want to serve and follow certain principles, enough principles to live there, then you have something very, very positive. And then the details of Varnasrama and how to train people and so forth, and that we can work out later. Prabhupada wanted us, as part of Varnasrama, to be Brahmins and teach. So we would could teach people how to farm, how to be self-sufficient, could teach people how to live in the mode of goodness, lifestyle change, teach people so many things, not just spiritual, but Brahmins teach everything. And so when you take that position as a Brahmin for society, then you have to start teaching other things. We could teach teachers how to teach by helping them live a sattvic life. Because if you're a teacher, you're a Brahmin, and Brahmins are in sattva guna. So that's the idea. Okay, so now I'm going to go down and see. Okay. So we're going to read again. Christe says, I'd be waiting in line to move in. Yeah. We'll do it in Lithuania. It's cheaper. But the weather's not so good in the winter. Okay. Now, okay. So we'll continue reading. If you go down to where you see Tanya's name, almost at the bottom, like 5 from the bottom. Sri Ramananda Roy then suggested renunciation. So there's conversations going on. Lord Chaitanya is saying, tell me, what's the highest truth? So Ramananda Roy said, well, Varnashram. This is like a transcendental conversation. It was just like Arjuna and Krishna. Like, how was Arjuna in Maya and illusion and asking all these questions that only conditioned souls would act? Because Krishna wanted him to. Because Krishna wanted to address all those points. So he put Arjuna into that position. So was it Maya? Was Arjuna in Maya? Well, externally it looked like he was in Maya. But Prabhupada said, it's really not Maya, because everything was going on by Krishna's will. So by Krishna's will, he was illusioned. So is that really Maya? Because it wasn't by Arjuna's will. So the same way, Ramananda Roy is saying these things because Mahaprabhu wants to exalt the glories of pure devotional service. So he wants him to talk about all things that aren't pure devotional service. So he can say, no, not that, not that. In other words, like sometimes to understand clearly what is the best, you don't just say this is the best, but you go down the list and you explain what is the problem with this, and now you understand why this is the best. But if I just tell you this is the best because it has A, B, and C, it's not as clear as if I say this is the best, and I will explain why this is not good, why this is not the best, why this is not the best. And then you're like, oh, now I understand. Because it doesn't have these faults that these have. If I just told you what it is, you may not know all the faults. So that's what Lord Chaitanya is doing in this conversation. He's telling Ramananda Roy, well, tell me. And Ramananda Roy, acting under the will of the Lord, is saying exactly what Lord Chaitanya wants him to say. And every time he says something other than complete surrender, unmotivated devotional, until he comes to unmotivated devotional service, every time Lord Chaitanya says, no, keep going. So now what's happening here, so he talks about Varnasrama and Lord Chaitanya says, no, that's just external. That's not really, it's not really what we want. It's not the highest thing. It's not the ultimate. So then Ramananda Roy says, okay, renunciation, renounce the fruits of your work. Bhagavad Gita 9:27, whatever you do, whatever you eat, whatever you give, as well as whatever you perform in penance, offer to me. See more. Click. Offer to me alone. This dedication on the part of the worker suggests that the personality of Godhead is a step higher than the impersonal conception of the Varnasrama system, but still, the relation of the living being and the Lord is not distinct in that way. The Lord therefore rejected this. In other words, it's not pure, because, you could give up the fruits of your work, but you could do it for the wrong reason. So, Tanya, I need some more to read. So, give up the fruits. Okay, you gave up the fruits, but where's the pure bhakti? It's not discussed. So Lord Chaitanya is saying, keep it coming, because this is an interesting conversation, because you'll see that until Ramananda Roy says devotional service without any desire for anything other than the satisfaction of Krishna, until he comes to that point, Lord Chaitanya says, no, it's not, you're not there yet. Roy then suggested renunciation of the Varnashram Dharma and acceptance of devotional service. The Lord did not approve of this suggestion, and you're wondering why, and we'll find out. Also for the reason that all of a sudden one should not renounce his position that may not bring in the hold on. Define where wow, that's a long one. Okay. All of a sudden one should not renounce his position, for that may not bring in the desired result. In other words, stay in your position, and you may not be qualified to renounce. And there's another reason that maybe is going to come up here, but I'll just say it just in case. He didn't describe what kind of devotional service. So just to say, you say devotional service is the highest. In and of itself, that's not true. Devotional service that's not motivated by any desire to achieve anything material, that's the highest. But devotional service could be contaminated. Anyabhilashitam shunyam. It should not be contaminated. So when Ramananda Roy said devotional service, devotional service in and of itself, it's not. That's not, if I say devotional service is the highest thing, but it has to be qualified. Because if it's not pure devotional service, it's not the highest thing. Correct? Okay. It was further suggested by Raye that attainment of spiritual realization freed from the material conception of life, which would be Brahmabhuta, realizing you're the soul, is the topmost achievement for the living being. The Lord rejected this suggestion also, because on the plea of spiritual realization, much havoc has been wrought by unscrupulous persons. In other words, impersonalists. The highest thing is to realize you're not the body. Yeah, but then you think you're God. Therefore, all of a sudden, this is not possible. Then Raye suggested sincere association of self-realized souls and hearing submissively the transcendental message of the pastimes of the personality of Godhead. This suggestion was welcomed by the Lord. This suggestion was made following in the footsteps of Brahmaji, who said that the personality of Godhead is known as Ajita, or one who cannot be conquered or approached by anyone. But such Ajita also becomes conquered by one method, which is very simple. The simple method is that one has to give up the arrogant attitude of declaring oneself to be God himself. Gyane prayasham, the verse that's called Gyane prayasham buddhapasya namanta eva. So it's this verse here that Lord Chaitanya finally accepted. But this verse is saying you should give up. Basically, it's saying you should give up material desire and just submissively hear. And then Lord Chaitanya said, okay, because that was the beginning of defining pure devotional service. So Lord Chaitanya said, okay, pure devotional service. And you finally hit it. So that was the first verse that he accepted. And what was so interesting when I was, recently I was studying this conversation, then a friend of mine, well, he's actually my neighbor, he said, what verse is it that Lord Chaitanya accepted? And I hadn't, when he asked me that, I hadn't read that story in a long time. I'm going to try to see if I can give you my darshan. Let's see what happens now. We're going to hit the try again button for darshan. There I am, darshan, with the light. We're in the light. When I came in, it was cloudy, so hold on a second. So I hadn't read that story in a long time. So I was, rather than being able to say it from memory, I had to think like, okay, well, logically, where would Lord Chaitanya say, okay, you've got it. So I said, Sarvadhamma Pratyaja. And Ramananda Roy quoted that verse, just surrender. And Lord Chaitanya said, no. And so the point was that surrender, if you look at it in one sense, that surrender that Krishna's saying, he's just saying, well, don't. It's just the beginning stage. It's not elucidating clearly that you should do pure devotional service, which kind of sounds strange for us because when Prabhupada talks about surrender, he talks about the 6 items of surrender. And for us, it's pure devotional service. But in a more, I don't know if you could call it traditional context or strict context, that is just the beginning. You surrender, and then after that, you can come to the level of pure devotional service. So the surrender was like a preliminary stage, but it wasn't the pure devotional stage. So Lord Chaitanya rejected that, interestingly. So I began doing a little research on how Prabhupada used the word surrender, sharanam. And we came to the conclusion that if you look at how Prabhupada used it, it's not being used in the way Mahaprabhu was understanding it, the way Mahaprabhu was having it discussed with Ramananda Roy. It was discussed in a different context. So in that sense, I was technically right to say surrender based on how Prabhupada defined it. But the way Mahaprabhu was defining it in the sequence is that surrender was just like Bhagavad Gita brings you to the point of devotional service, but it doesn't mean that it's pure. But Prabhupada brought us to the point of pure devotional service, right? Right from the very beginning, he was talking about it, right? So, yes. Hare Krishna. Gauranga. Okay, so we're going to continue reading, if I can remember where. Simple method is that one has to give up the arrogant attitude of declaring oneself to be God himself. One must be very meek and submissive. Try to live peacefully by lending the ear to the speeches of the transcendental self-realized soul who speaks on the message of Bhagavad Dharma or the religion of glorifying the Supreme Lord and his devotees. To glorify a great man is a natural instinct for living beings, but they have not learned to glorify the Lord. Perfection of life is attained simply by glorifying the Lord in association with a self-realized devotee of the Lord. The self-realized devotee is he who surrenders unto the Lord fully and who does not have attachment for material prosperity. Material prosperity and sense enjoyment and their advancement are all activities of ignorance in human society. Peace and friendship are impossible for a society detached from the association of God and his devotees. It is imperative, therefore, that one sincerely seek the association of pure devotees and hear them patiently and submissively from any position of life. The position of a person in the higher or lower statuses does not hamper one on the path of self-realization. The only thing one has to do is to hear from a self-realized soul with a routine program. The teacher may also deliver lectures from the Vedic literatures following in the footsteps of the bygone acharyas with the who realized the absolute truth. Lord Caitanya Mahaprabhu recommended the simple method of self-realization, generally known as Bhagavad Dharma. Srimad Bhagavatam is the perfect guide for this purpose. So, as you know, the Bhagavatam is only discusses pure devotional service. So, Bhagavad Gita brings you to the point of surrender, and now you're ready for the Bhagavatam, because the Bhagavatam is now going to teach you through the lives of devotees and philosophically what is bhakti, who is Krishna. Of course, you understand already who is Krishna from the Gita, but you go more deeply, especially into pure bhakti. So the Bhagavatam's stated purpose is that it's going to teach you about pure bhakti. Really, the Bhagavatam ultimately is glorifying Radharani. That's really what it's all about. That's a whole other topic that we discuss in 20 years when we're ready for that. But for now, the premise of the Bhagavatam is that we're only going to talk about pure bhakti. So pure bhakti means what? Whatever I want, whatever I don't want, whatever I feel like, it doesn't matter. It's what Krishna wants. It's what Krishna feels like. That's what concerns me. I'm not doing this to better myself materially. I'm not doing this to get liberated. I'm not doing this to avoid suffering, which you can't avoid anyway, even if you try. It's not possible. And I'm not doing this ultimately to go back to Godhead, but I'm doing this to please Krishna. And in that process, please my spiritual master. That's how I please Krishna. That's the premise of the Bhagavatam. That's what this book's going to give you. It's not going to give you anything material. So in Mahaprabhu's accepting this statement, he's brought us, he said, okay, now this is the Bhagavatam. This is what the Bhagavatam's about. And this is why the Bhagavatam is considered the supreme literature, because most other literatures have something else you can get from them, maybe mixed in with the bhakti. But this Bhagavad Purana, it is not going to mix anything in it. And whatever's in it, even if it doesn't seem to you that this is about pure bhakti, just try to understand that it is, and you'll begin to understand how it is. Dynasties of pure devotees or person, but it's meant to describe pure bhakti in relation to that story of the failings and the sufferings of that person, and then their ultimate surrender. So that's the idea. Somehow Krishna Karshini says she can see me. Can you all see me? Because I don't see myself. Which is good for me. I don't, I'm giving class and looking at myself in my screen. It's a little awkward. Tanya says, senior devotees tell me there were attempts at building such devotee communities in Croatia, villages with a temple and housing, which failed. Most of the devotees sold their houses and moved away. I must admit that confuses and worries. Seymour. Worries me. I don't know what to think. It sounds so wonderful in theory. But in practice, it's obviously not that simple. I was exactly thinking about this same thing, because communities are something I think about a lot. And this point I also think about a lot. And I was thinking of Israel, because Israel has a history of the kibbutz. It's part of the culture. And so one of the challenges we have in creating communities is to create communities in parts of the world that don't have a history of communities, at least not a recent history, or it's not in their blood. Gabriela from Chile said that she was part of a community and it is going really well. And I was thinking, and we may have a community of devotees, but maybe it doesn't go as well as her community. So it means that there's principles that are ingrained within the blood, so to speak, of the people in those communities. It can also mean other things, that maybe some of those people weren't, suited to live in a community, weren't suited to live in the country. There could have been financial problems that they actually all wanted to live, but they couldn't make a living and they couldn't figure it out. There could be so many things. So it's definitely an ideal, which we have to work for. But as you know, even though we have Krishna consciousness and we have knowledge of Krishna consciousness, we're still applying it in a world which is antagonistic. And we have our conditioning also, which tends to make things more difficult in getting along, for example, or living simply, for example, or being able to give up some of the comforts we're used to. So these are all challenges, and we are the first generation or the second generation that's trying to do this. So we will likely be the pioneers who have to iron out so many of the problems that would make it easier for the next generation. Like, you form a community, you'll have problems, but your children, in theory, will have less problems because you've worked out the problems, and the people who couldn't live in those communities are not there anymore, and it's only the devotees who have that temperament, and then they understand now the mistakes they've made, they've corrected that, what's required to work in a community, what values you need to share, who's capable of living, and and really also becoming, living like that means becoming free from ego. We can't ultimately be successful, extremely successful doing anything if everybody's thinking, I want to be in charge, I know more than others. So that's part of the problem. Right? Well, these are all challenges. Like sometimes everything is going fine in Krishna consciousness and everybody's happy because you're not confronting challenges. But as soon as you move out of that comfort zone into a new area, all of a sudden there's all kinds of problems that weren't existing before because you're trying to move out to another level. And when you move into that other level, then you start having problems because of the challenges. But oftentimes that's what's necessary to go further, so that's spreading Krishna consciousness we're in a world which is antagonistic to it, and it's not easy. We have many farm projects in America, but none of them have never really taken off in the way that we envisioned them, partially due to the fact that none of us are farmers, or most of us are not farmers. None of us are, able to live as simply as would be best. Many of us have a hard time accepting authority, getting along with others. So these are all like challenges that we work through. And one of the things that I believe we are seeing and we will continue to see is that there will be a realization when you're working to build a community. There'll be a realization when you start hitting a wall that if we don't get beyond our own egos and desires, we're not going to be able to go any further. We're not going to be able to build a society as Prabhupada envisioned it. And so it's like it's an inevitable realization at a certain point when you're trying to do something great that it requires tremendous cooperation amongst everyone, and it requires the minimization of ego. Who's going to be in charge? The person who's best, the person who's most qualified. That's the person. Who's going to do this? The person. Who's going to do that? The person most qualified. And through failure, because of ego or other reasons, we often come to this realization that we did it wrong. And we have to put our egos aside and do it right. And that doesn't happen always easily. It may take generations for that to happen. But that's usually what happens, or the project fails. So we're a young movement, and you and I are the ones kind of being the guinea pigs in new projects and new areas, and making mistakes, and even you have because we're such a new movement, even you have situations where you have success, lots of success, but 30 years later you don't have success because things have now changed in the last 30 years. The devotees changed, society has changed. And now it's kind of like a new game with new rules. And so you have to learn the new rules in the new game. And you have to play it with different, what do you call those when you play a game? We'll just say balls, different kinds of balls, rackets, bats, equipment. Yeah, you may have to play part of the game with some new equipment and learn how to use that equipment. So that's just the reality. And if we want to spread Krishna consciousness, then that understanding has to be there, that we're going to face some real difficulties and anxieties to be able to be able to succeed. And if you're not willing to do that, then there's going to be a limit to how much you can do. And just looking at it on a very base practical level, if you're successful at spreading Krishna consciousness, what happens? People come. When people come, what happens? Well, you have to take care of them. And people have problems, which means you have to take care of their problems. People don't get along. You have to help them get along. You have more people come, there's more work to do. You're going to need more help. You're going to need more expertise at what you do, because with 5 people, you could do it. Now with 500, you need expertise. So as we grow, new challenges. And that's just the way it is. And as we learn and become expert, we pass that down to the next generation. They don't have to deal with what we dealt with, but then they'll have their own challenges. So that's kind of how I see it going and continuing. So you can see me. So I'm the only one who can't see me. That's weird. Isn't there a song like that by the Beatles? You can't see me. Maybe that's the name of this class. You can't see me. Krishna Karshani says, how to surrender to Krishna having no full faith in Krishna? You can't. How to surrender to Krishna having faith in our own abilities to take care of ourselves? Well, it's not that we don't try to take care of ourselves, but we're limited. That's obvious. So how, I don't understand the second question, because how could we have entirely faith in ourselves when, look at COVID, How are you going to take care of yourself when you get COVID? When you're, for somebody who's infected and their body's breaking down, at some point it's like, you know how when you get really sick and you're doing everything and you're not getting better, it's kind of obvious you're not the controller. And during allergy season, which will come up soon, you remember last year, you'd see me give class and my eyes would be red and I'd be sneezing, and It was horrible. And the body was fully out of my control. And then even at the point I surrendered to some allopathic allergy medicine, even at some days it was so bad that wasn't even working. And so, I did my best, and I can't control it all. So, what to do? But you ask how to have faith, how to surrender to Krishna, having no full faith. Faith is the beginning. And then, as Prabhupada said, as you progress, the faith increases. So if faith is not increasing, we're not advancing. At least in some way, we're not advancing. And so the only answer is, without faith, how can you surrender? Because Krishna is saying, surrender, I'll protect you. And you think, well, I'll protect myself. Then you won't be able to surrender. I can answer this question, Krishna Karshani, from my personal experience, and I don't know if everyone can emulate me, but my particular mood or feeling, and I think I had this even before I was a devotee, was that I have many, many limitations, but I have many things which I have to do, which I feel are necessary, and they're beyond my limitations, but I can't not do them. And I don't shy away from them. I just put my faith in Krishna. Krishna, I can't do this, so I need your help. And it always works out. He always helps me. In fact, the japa workshop we had the past 2 weekends, I don't know if I clearly explained this principle, but I explained it, I think I explained it Wednesday on our japa class in more detail, or Monday. And that is, when things are difficult, especially if you have difficult, I was specifically talking about service. You have service that's difficult. A lot of times we see when we have service that's difficult, our japa gets better because we're praying to Krishna. I don't think I can do this. Without you, I'm not going to be able to do this. Please empower me, or give me intelligence or strength, or whatever it is I require. I'm sure you've all had experience of this. But if you haven't had experience, or you want more experience of it, then this sounds like a joke, but I'm actually serious. Take on service that's a little bit bigger than you. Take on service that you find difficult to do. It will improve your japa immediately, because when you're chanting, that's going to come to your mind. I don't think I can do this service. This is so difficult. Hare Krishna, Krishna, please empower me. Please help me. So getting out of your comfort zone actually helps your japa. It really does. So I feel like telling every devotee, move out of your comfort zone. Because if you're having trouble with japa, and if you move out of your comfort zone in service, you'll be forced to beg, you'll be forced to pray. In fact, I should do a video on that. We'll call it Move Out of Your Comfort Zone Japa, right? But it's true. I'm sure a lot of you, or maybe all of you, have this experience, right? A lot of book distributors have this experience. They want to do more books, and sometimes it's difficult, and during japa, they're just praying. Some devotees in one temple were holding Bhagavatams while they chant japa, Krishna, help me distribute, empower me. So faith is essential. If you don't have faith, get it somehow or other. And then the next question is, if you don't have faith, what do you have faith in? It's not that you don't have faith. You say, I don't have faith in Krishna. Okay. To the degree, let's say you have faith as an ingredient, 100%. Four cups of faith equals 100% of faith. So you say, I have 50% faith in Krishna. I go, well, where'd you pour the other 50%? In my ego, in my own ability. Yeah. So you want to get 100% faith in Krishna. So if you say, I don't have full faith in Krishna, then think, where am I putting that faith? And am I putting that faith in a false place, or a place that is It's just illusory. I mean, put faith in yourself. It's like a limited, weak human being. Okay, you have some ability, you have some intelligence. You can have faith in that. But the point is, where does that ability, intelligence come from? What if he takes it away from you? Then how much faith are you going to have in it? And you got your abilities, from him in the first place. Okay, I hope that answers the question. So Maya is asking, in Slovenia, some devotees have been planning to make such community for many years. It hasn't been done yet. But there are some devotees in the countryside already doing smaller farm projects separately. Yeah. This is also an interesting point, because one thing that's going on in our movement, it's been going on for a long time, but I think it's maybe more common now. There's two kinds of ways projects start. They start as temples, or they start as individuals. So sometimes individuals may succeed at creating like a bhakti center or a community, more so than a temple. Yeah, and that may be in some cases a better way. The like-minded devotees will go together and control themselves, create their own programs. You can't say one way is better than the other, but if you have, we have this problem. If you have a charismatic leader, things always go better. But when the charismatic leader goes back to Godhead, then what? Then you're used to that leader. So that is sometimes a problem. It's got to be some kind of communal. There are communal systems, you can study them, that work well. So Krishna Karshini says, Alachua is an example of the best devotee community. You told me that everyone can find a place there. I can explain why. The community was created in a natural way, it seems. Yeah, there were no leaders. No, there were leaders, but they weren't controlling anybody. And one of the reasons there was no need, because there were like 150 Prabhupada disciples here. So it's like half the community was qualified to lead. So it was everything happened organically. It's like a garden that grows because birds are eating seeds, and then the birds are planting the seeds, and all these plants are growing, and you didn't plant them. It was a little bit like that. So Krishna Karshini says, my point is that only pure devotees have full faith. The beginner has not full faith. So how the beginner can surrender having no full faith? Well, according to Prabhupada's definition of beginning surrender, is you believe what Krishna says. So if you call yourself a devotee and you don't believe what Krishna says, then you don't have faith. That was his definition. And then that faith grows. Okay, I believe what he says. Maybe I'm not following it perfectly, but at least I believe it. Right? And then it manifests in your life as you advance. You won't see me. Yeah, Marco, he's our go-to man for Beatles. For everything you want to know, rock and roll, just go to Marco. You won't see me is a Beatles song. And it's like a message from Krishna to them, as long as they all personal view. Yeah, that was Krishna was singing that song, right? I once thought of doing a radio show where we take songs and we give the Krishna conscious version of the song. There's a lot of songs out there which are directly Krishna conscious, and some are not directly, but it's the boy's talking about a girl or girl about a boy, but it can be applied to bhakti. Just take the girl out and put Krishna in there, and then the song makes sense. Yeah. Okay. So, ladies and gentlemen, I think I'm going to stop here. I hate to disappoint you, but I'm going to stop now. And we're going to get ready for our japa. You're all invited. In 13 minutes, we'll see you. And Hare Krishna to everyone. And Srila Prabhupada ki jai, Go Premanandi, Hari Hari Bol.